Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Janavanava Girivardhani Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Astota Shatashi Srimad Abhaya Charnadavinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajikacharya Astota Shatashi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Kodi Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Oh glorious to Sim devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh glorious to Sim devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh glorious to Sim devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh glorious to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Oh glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 5, Frustration of the Sacrifice of Daksha. And unfortunately I was given the wrong verse to prepare for. But anyway, let's just give it a go. Kruda. Kruda sudashtoshta puta sadhu jatir. Jatam tadidvani sato garochisham. Udkritya rudra sahasotito hasan. Gambira nado visasarjatam bhuvi. Kruda sudashta stoshta puta sadhu jatir. Jatam tadidvani sato garochisham. Utkritya rudra sahasotito hasan. Gambira nado visasarjatam bhuvi. Kruda sudashtoshta puta sadhu jatir. Jatam tadidvani sato garochisham. Utkritya rudra sahasotito hasan. Gambira nado visasarjatam bhuvi. Jatam tadivani sato garochisham. Mataji's? Sudashtoshta puta sadhu jati. Sato garochisham. Krudaha, very angry. Sudashta Oshta Putaha, pressing his lips with his teeth. Saha, he, Lord Shiva. Tu Jatihi, having a cluster of hair on his head. Chatam, one hair. Tadit, of electricity. Vani, of fire. Sata, a flame. Ukra, terrible. Rochisham, blazing. Utkritya, snatching. Rudraha, Lord Shiva. Sahasa, at once. Utitaha, stood up. Hasan, laughing. Gambira, deep. Nadaha, sound. Visasarja, dashed. Tam, that, hair. Huvi, on the ground. Translation. Thus Lord Shiva, being extremely angry, pressed his lips with his teeth and immediately snatched from his head a strand of hair which blazed like electricity or fire. He stood up at once, laughing like a madman, and dashed the hair to the ground. So there's two more verses till a purport comes. Tato tikayas tanuvas vishandivam sahasra bahur ganaruk trisuryadrik karala damstro jvalat agni murda jaha kapala mali vividojat yatayudaha. Translation. A fearful black demon as high as the sky and as bright as 3 suns combined was thereby created. His teeth very fearful and the hairs on his head like burning fire. He had thousands of arms equipped with various weapons, and he was garlanded with the heads of men. Text 4. Tam kim karomiti grinantam aha padang jalim bhagavan bhuta nataha daksham sayagyam jahimad patanam tam agrani rudra patam shakome. When that gigantic demon asked with folded hands, "What shall I do, my lord?" Lord Shiva, who is known as Bhutanath, directly ordered, "Because you are born from my body, you are the chief of all my associates. Therefore kill Daksha and his soldiers at the sacrifice." Purport. Here is the beginning of competition between Brahma Tejas and Shiva Tejas. By Brahma Tejas, Brahminical strength, Bhrigu Muni had created the Ribu demigods who had driven away the soldiers of Lord Shiva stationed in the arena. When Lord Shiva heard that his soldiers had been driven away, he created the tall black demon Virabhadra to retaliate. There is sometimes a competition between the mode of goodness and the mode of ignorance. That is the way of material existence. Even when one is situated in the mode of goodness, there is every possibility that his position will be mixed with or attacked by the mode of passion or ignorance. That is the law of material nature. Although pure goodness or Shuddha Sattva is the basic principle in the spiritual world, pure manifestation of goodness is not possible in this material world. Thus, the struggle for existence between different material qualities is always present. This quarrel between Lord Shiva and Bhrigu Muni, centering around Prajapati Daksha, is a practical example of such competition between the different qualitative modes of material nature. Shri Shri Radha Giridhari Ki Jai, Shri Gaunita Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Maharani Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. Offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. When will Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who is established within this material world, the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under his lotus feet? Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master and unto the feet of all Vaishnavas. Offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami, along with his elder brother Sanatan Goswami, as well as Raghunath Das and Raghunath Bhatta Gopal Bhatta and Srila Jiva Goswami. Offer my respectful obeisances to Lord Krishna Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, along with Advaita Acharya, Kadadhara, Shivasa, and other associates. Offer my respectful obeisances to Srimati Radharani and Shri Krishna, along with their associates, Shri Lalita and Vishaka. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandho Jagatpate, Gopesha Gopika Kanta, Radha Kanta, Namostate. O my dear Krishna, you are the friend of the distressed and the source of creation. You are the master of the gopis and the lover of Radharani. Offer my respectful obeisances unto you. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshvari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Offer my respects to Radharani, whose bodily complexion is like molten gold, and who is the queen of Vrindavan. You are the daughter of King Vrishabhanu, and you are very dear to Lord Krishna. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Offer my respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They can fulfill the desires of everyone, just like desire trees, and they are full of compassion for the fallen souls. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thus Lord Shiva, being extremely angry, pressed his lips with his teeth and immediately snatched from his head a strand of hair which blazed like electricity or fire. He stood up at once, laughing like a madman, and dashed the hair on the ground. So, we're starting a new chapter in this whole saga, this whole pastime between Daksha and Lord Shiva and Sati. So just at the end of the previous chapter, Sati committed suicide. She gave up her body due to its connection to Daksha, and due to Daksha being very offensive to Lord Shiva, who is a great devotee, as well as her husband. Various persons, there were various responses from persons all over the universe when this happened, which indicates to us also that the universe is more connected than what we realize, and even our planet was more connected to the universe in previous ages. So the different responses were there. Some they were astonished first of all, how Sati, who had everything, namely the greatest father, Daksha, who was the greatest king, you could say, in the universe, and she had the greatest husband, Lord Shiva. So how could someone who had everything want to give up her life? That was the first point that everyone was astonished about. And Srila Prabhupada explains that this is also indicative to us how, unless one has pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, nothing material can satisfy one. So even if one has everything material that one could possibly have, still one will not be satisfied. Another more clear example of that would be Hiranyakashipu, who was one of the greatest demons, and he had everything, even beyond what we can imagine, materially speaking. And still it is described that he was not satisfied. So one can be satisfied only by hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord in pure devotional service. As the Srimad Bhagavatam describes, Yayatma Suprasidati. By that process, the Atma becomes Suprasidati, fully satisfied. So that was the first point of astonishment. Sati had everything. How is it? What has caused her to give up her body, to commit suicide? In other words, to be so frustrated that she would commit suicide. Another point of astonishment was how could Daksha, who is the maintainer of all living entities, practically speaking, in this universe, because he's one of the progenitors, one of the persons who procreate and maintain all the living entities in this universe, how could he be so disrespectful to his very own daughter, to the extent that she would give up her body due to his disrespect and due to his neglect of her? That was another point of astonishment, that different people in the universe were another point that they were astonished about. And also, how is it that he did not even try to prevent it? This was the third point they were astonished about. That seeing what was going to happen, that she was about to give up her body due to his neglect, how is it that he, seeing what was about to happen, did not even try to stop her, did not even try to prevent it, did not even say anything or do anything when his own daughter was committing suicide because of his own actions? And Srila Prabhupada explains about the third reason, that when one is, because Daksha was very sexually inclined as a Prajapati, that due to excessive material attachments, his heart became so hard, he became so hard-hearted that despite his own daughter wanting to give up her life, he did not he did not try to stop it, because, as Srila Prabhupada explains, when someone is very hard-hearted due to false pride and prestige, which are a result of material attachment. So first there's material attachment, and that material attachment comes from being engaging too much in sense gratification. That leads to excessive material attachment. And then that excessive material attachment leads to false pride and arrogance. And that false pride and arrogance causes one's heart to become very hard. And Srila Prabhupada explains that in such a position, even a slight insult to one's pride and prestige can cause one to do the most horrible thing, even kill or prevent the death of not prevent the death of one's own children or relatives. So this is a danger Srila Prabhupada is alerting us to. And these are the things we can learn about sati's given up her body. So Bhrigu Muni, what happens then is that Lord Shiva's followers, seeing what's happened, they were there with Sati, and they considered now their master, or their mistress, we could say, Sati. They had failed to protect her. And being loyal servants, they decided that because they'd failed to protect her, it would be best that they just give up their own lives, because they'd failed in their duty as the servant. And therefore they decided that they would do that, but they would first kill Daksha and all of his followers, because they felt that, factually speaking, they were right, that Daksha and all of his followers included, were at least partly responsible for Sati's death, because his followers were supporters of Daksha, and they, due to fear of Daksha, did not do anything, even though such a wrong action was taking place. So they began approaching, and Bhrigu Muni, seeing the situation, Bhrigu Muni, the leader of the Brahmanas present in the sacrifice, he began to offer oblations into the sacrificial fire to create demigods which would kill those who tried to disturb yogic performances, which obviously was now what Lord Shiva's followers were about to do. So many Ribu demigods began to come out of the fire. And Srila Prabhupada points out how this is indicative of the power of Vedic mantras if they're chanted properly by persons who are practiced in being able to chant the mantras properly. That's the one side of it. But the other side of it is that they also need to be able to live a pure, or have a certain purity of lifestyle. A certain purity of lifestyle is required also in order for the mantras to have potency. So those two things together, the accents and the meter and so on, pronunciation, all those things, as well as the purity of the brahmanas who are performing such actions. And as is explained by Srila Prabhupada, as well as by Lord Chaitanya in his conversation with the Kazi, the Chand Kazi, that such brahmanas are not available today anymore. That is not there anymore. We don't have such brahmanas who have such brahmatejas and ability and so on, that they can chant Vedic mantras properly. So in the conversation with the Chand Kazi, Lord Chaitanya was explaining, because the Chand Kazi, first Lord Chaitanya criticized him for eating cows, cow's flesh and slaughtering cows. Of course, today everyone slaughters cows and eats cow's flesh, unfortunately. And the Chand Kazi replied that, but in the Vedic, in the Vedas also there's prescription for animal sacrifice. And Lord Chaitanya explained that was not for the sake of meat eating, that was to test to demonstrate, or kind of to test as well that the mantras are being chanted properly, and demonstrate the potency of the Vedic mantras. So when the animal was sacrificed, say for example a horse was sacrificed in the Ashwamedha Yagya, then by chanting the Vedic mantras, the horse will come back to life again. And that demonstrated that the mantras were being chanted properly. And so that's when Lord Chaitanya said that in this age of Kali that's forbidden, because animal sacrifice, because we don't have qualified brahmanas present to do that. But it's still interesting to read how it was done, and just to see how Bhrigu Muni just immediately created thousands and thousands of Ribu demigods just by chanting those mantras. So then an interesting point is made there that in this age the process of sacrifice recommended is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11th canto, chapter 5, text 32. Krishna Varnam Tusha Krishnam Sango Pangascha Parshadam Yagye Sankirtana Praye Yajantihi Sumedashaha. That in the age of Kali, intelligent persons worship the incarnation of Godhead, who, although Krishna himself is not blackish, and he is accompanied by his associates, and he is always engaged in the congregational chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So that's called the Sankirtana Yagya. Yagya Sankirtana, or the Sankirtana Yagya, the sacrifice of the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains the importance of sacrifice, that through sacrifice, rains are produced, and those rains obviously is what allows food grains to grow, and that all living beings are, as we know, subsisting on food grains, but that it cannot happen without sacrifice. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the purports to Bhagavad Gita that the only process of sacrifice that works in this age is the chanting of the holy names, the Sankirtana Yagya. And so the Sankirtana Yagya, he says, must therefore be performed at least to get sufficient rain. Now, so that is there, that at least for the basic necessities of life, so in this age, if there's regular Sankirtan Yagya taking place, then there'll be sufficient rain and people can live nicely. You can't have that without sacrifice, that's the point. You can't just expect it to come, just like you can't expect your water bill or electricity bills. You can't expect water and electricity without paying your electricity bill or water bill. So nothing comes for free. You have to perform a sacrifice in order to get things, because it's all being controlled by persons. But when we perform the Sankirtana Yagya, then all the demigods who provide these things are automatically satisfied, because you're satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore these things are provided. Now, to take that a step further, Srila Prabhupada also explains elsewhere that one should not actually perform the Sankirtan Yagya for the purpose of material benefits. And he gives the example in one lecture. He speaks about how once there was a drought in, I think, Calcutta or somewhere in India, a very severe drought which led to a famine. And Prabhupada explains that one Babaji arranged a big Sankirtan party, to like procession in the street like we do Harinam, for the purpose of ending the famine. And so that took place, and everyone took part in it because they were so desperate, and it did end the famine. Srila Prabhupada explains that it then, I don't know if it was next day or very soon after, began to rain and the whole thing was over. And he explains that it was understood that, and it was even reported in the newspapers and everything, that the Sankirtan party ended the famine, and it was like a well-known thing. However, Srila Prabhupada explains there also that is actually nama aparada. That is actually offensive chanting, because it's chanting for material benefit is offensive chanting. Pure chanting means you chant simply to satisfy Krishna, for Krishna's pleasure. We chant in Hare Krishna and engage in the Sankirtan Yagya in order to become purified of material existence and awaken our love of God. That is our purpose in chanting. And we're chanting for Krishna's pleasure. However, as a side effect, that is the point Srila Prabhupada is making, that as a side effect, there will also be, one's material necessities will be provided for. Just like, for example, say someone is going to, like a student, someone in their early 20s, they've left school and they're going to go study abroad or study in a different city, and they're staying in the hostel or the residence, and their parents are providing them a monthly allowance in order that they can study. So if they just focus on doing their studies, doing the right thing, then naturally the parents will provide them with the money they need in order for them to get by. But if they misuse the money, then the parents may consider stopping that allowance. So in a similar way, if we use our human form of life in the correct way to attain self-realization and God-realization, then automatically the material necessities of life will be provided. But if we misuse our human form of life just for sense gratification, then we become like thieves, and therefore these things may start to be cut off and not provided for us properly. I hope that makes sense. It's a subtle point, but this is how it works. We just have to focus on performing the Sankirtan Yagya, becoming Krishna conscious, and thus fulfilling the purpose of the human form of life, which is to attain self-realization and God-realization. Automatically, as a result, whatever we need in order to do that, all the material necessities required in order to do that will be supplied automatically, because all the persons who are providing these things will be satisfied by what we're doing. Okay. So the Sankirtan Yagya is the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And that expands into many other activities. Like, for example, devotees go out and distribute books. Because by distributing books, they're giving other people the opportunity to chant the holy name of the Lord. Given the process of bhakti yoga and Krishna consciousness to other people. And in that way it becomes congregational chanting. It can't be congregational chanting with just one person. So the Sankirtan Yagya involves many different activities. Distributing books, we have outreach programs, university programs, you have prasadam distribution, and all those programs involve so many activities like cooking, cleaning, organizing, managing, and it is all part of the Sankirtan Yagya. However, they expand from the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. That is the important point also to remember, that all of our activities in the Sankirtan Yagya expand from originally coming from our individual japa, our chanting of Hare Krishna on beads. That is where it all begins, and that expands into congregational chanting or kirtan with the devotees, and that expands into other things like chanting the holy name on the street, Harinam, and various programs we arrange, and that then expands and expands into so many other activities, book distribution and all these other programs. But it is important to remember that it is all coming from our individual japa, our individual chanting on Hare Krishna on beads. That connects us with Krishna and gives us the potency to perform all the other activities properly. So in this way we can understand the Sankirtana Yagya and how to perform it. So coming back to the pastime of Daksha, Sati then eventually, the Ribhu demigods now created by Bhrigu Muni through his mantras went to attack the followers of Lord Shiva, and they scattered, they dispersed. And as far as I understand, they went back to Lord Shiva and he explained to them what happened. Now he is retaliating. But we should not misunderstand Lord Shiva's retaliation. Lord Shiva is he's a great devotee of the Lord, and his consciousness is as has been described in the previous chapter, his consciousness is on the Vasudeva platform, the platform of pure goodness, absorbed in Krishna consciousness, absorbed in love of Krishna and transcendental to the modes of material nature. So his anger here, as we will find out later on, is more out of, it's like the anger of a great devotee. Now the anger of a great devotee is not a product of the mode of ignorance. It is a very important point for us to understand, a very important lesson for us to consider. And I can give one example of Srila Prabhupada. That once Srila Prabhupada was doing it was like a type of a initiation or something of that sort. And he asked for Pushpanjali, something, like flowers in other words, in order to perform the ceremony. And the devotees they were so new, they didn't really know what that was, so they brought pushpa anna or something like this, some rice prep. They just totally misunderstood what he meant. I may have gotten it mixed up, but the point is they misunderstood what he meant completely. And Srila Prabhupada became angry. And it was interesting because they were actually the media was there and everything, and Srila Prabhupada did not consider that. He was not trying to impress anyone. He's just. But the point is that his anger had nothing to do with his own personal desires. It was all about satisfying Krishna, all about Krishna's service. And when so devotees have often remarked, devotees who have served Srila Prabhupada personally, and it's a very important point, that devotees who have served Srila Prabhupada personally have often remarked that when Srila Prabhupada would become angry, the moment you gave the solution, so he'd be angry, apparently it would seem angry, but the moment you kind of provided the solution that, okay, I'll do this, I'll do it like that, and he saw you doing it, immediately the anger would stop. And everything would be like completely normal again. Whereas those of us who have gotten angry before, or get angry regularly due to the mode of ignorance, as you know, it's hard to it just kind of goes through you, and it just kind of lingers and really disturbs your consciousness. So that, but transcendental anger is different. It's something that is not that we don't have so much experience of that on the material platform. And it's completely pure, free from the mode of ignorance. It's within Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness. Simply to achieve something for Krishna's purpose, the pure devotee, may become transcendently angry. The spiritual master may, if needed, demonstrate transcendental anger in order to get the disciple to understand something that they're just not getting. But it's completely controlled and for Krishna's pleasure. That's the point. So it would be better that we understand Lord Shiva's anger in those terms. In order to teach Daksha and his followers a lesson, Lord Shiva displays this anger and performs these activities that he's about to do. We will read about it later, that Lord Shiva explains. It's simply to teach them a lesson, and it's for a particular purpose. He himself is not at all disturbed, or personally upset with him or anything. So it's another important lesson. Lord Shiva creates he's in charge of the mode of ignorance. That's his duty in the material universe. And using that side of things, he creates the Virabhadra demon. Whereas Bhrigu Muni uses Brahma Tejas, he uses the mode of goodness. The Lord Shiva uses the mode of ignorance to create this demon, and Bhrigu Muni creates the mode of goodness to create those Ribu demigods. So it's different kinds of power that are there. And it's recommended that we do things in the mode of goodness, and the Vedic civilization was based in the mode of goodness. Things were done through mantra, not through tantra. There's mantra, and there's tantra, and then there's yantra. So yantra is what we have today. Yantra means machine. It's machine-like civilization. Everything's based on machines, mechanical things. But the Vedic civilization was based on mantra, refinement of sound, and in the mode of goodness. But then there's also some civilizations rely more on the mode of ignorance, tantra, to achieve things. So it's there's in South Africa there's a type of a demoniac entity. We do believe it is called a tokolosh. And how it is generally understood is that the tokolosh is created by a sangoma, which is like the herbal type of persons who know herbal medicine, but they also know black magic. And it is a very well-known thing that if someone's upset with you, they may go to a sangoma, and the sangoma will create a tokolosh. And that tokolosh, demoniac entity, will cause you a lot of harm. And many people say it's just a myth and all that, of course. But many people also say it's not a myth. So anyway, we're not going to say either or. But I know one devotee who, at least that understanding is there in the traditional culture. It is there. And I know one devotee who grew up in those kind of areas. A very nice, honest devotee. He told me he saw a tokolosh. Would you believe it? He saw a tokolosh in the eyes. He said it had red eyes and red hair. And he said its skin was, because it's generally in African culture, but he pointed out its skin was not like an African skin, it was more like a reddish skin. But anyway, the point is that it's through that sort of mode of ignorance type of power that such things, the demon is created, and a living entity with a particular type of karma enters that body when it is created through the black magic. An example that is later on we will read in the 6th canto of King Chitraketu, who was cursed. He was a great devotee, but he was cursed to become a demon. And he became the great demon, Vritrasura. And Vritrasura was born also in a type of a sacrifice. And so King Chitraketu, the body was born in the sacrifice. And King Chitraketu, the living entity that has entered that body of Vritrasura. Anyway, it's just a technical thing to understand of how these things are working. But the point is that these things are there in this material world because the different modes of material nature are there. But the Vedic civilization relies on the mode of relies on the mode of goodness and encourages the mode of goodness, should I say. And that will bring us to our final point of the 3 modes of material nature. So there are 3 modes of material nature in this material world. And Srila Prabhupada is explaining that there's like competition between these 3 modes of material nature. So we may recall Krishna explaining this in Bhagavad Gita, how the 3 modes are actually competing always. Sometimes goodness is prominent, sometimes mode of passion is prominent, and sometimes mode of ignorance is prominent. So mode of goodness is characterized by knowledge, Mode of passion is characterized by like longings and desires, unlimited desires, and the mode of ignorance is characterized by foolishness and anger and that sort of thing. Intoxication and sleep are also included in the mode of ignorance. So these three modes of material nature are there, and we've always sort of been affected by them in different ways. And why does the Vedic culture, though, encourage the mode of goodness? Because the mode of goodness is the most suitable platform. Is the most suitable platform to situate oneself on in order to attain transcendence. In order to transcend the modes of material nature, come to the spiritual platform of being self-realized and realizing Krishna, the mode of goodness is the best platform to establish oneself on. Although it is material, it's the best material situation that one can be in order to practice spiritual life. So that is why we have so many of our rules and regulations in this process of Krishna consciousness are simply to help bring us to the mode of goodness. Like rising early, bathing regularly, always wearing clean clothes, following the four regulative principles. These are all to help bring us to the mode of goodness. And if we're in that mode of goodness, and from there chant Hare Krishna and engage in devotional service and follow the process of devotional service of Krishna consciousness, then we can more easily attain Krishna consciousness. Whereas if we live in the mode of ignorance, taking intoxication, eating foods that are in the mode of ignorance, which includes meat and other things, sleeping too much, sleeping in, that sort of thing, and not being clean and that sort of thing, then it will be very difficult to actually chant Hare Krishna properly and practice our spiritual life. And the same goes for the mode of passion. Always being overly materially attached, always trying to fulfill excessive material desires. That is also not very conducive to becoming Krishna conscious. So we should take seriously the idea of trying to be in the mode of goodness, and that will really help us to become Krishna conscious. Okay, so we'll end on that point. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Are there any comments or questions? Any realizations? Anybody like to share? Yes, Charlie Nasbur. Yeah.
There is sufficient, I guess there are families that, for the most part, there is enough food being produced.
Yeah.
Especially in the countries that are technologically advanced and use their mystic power of microbes to automate farming with giant machines.
Yeah.
It's very good effort.
Yeah.
There's a number of people working in the farming industry that produce enough grains and food stuff to feed the country.
Yeah.
In spite of there being no sacrifice or even lots of coffee and so on. So
Yeah.
I always understand that the lack of sacrifice doesn't produce the family.
Yeah. So did everybody hear his question? He will say that that it appears that although there's not sacrifice going on, still people basically, in many cases at least, they live in, these things are still being provided. Rain is there, food is there, and especially in the countries where they rely on their yantra mystic power, their use of machines and so on to produce crops and so on. Well, Srila Prabhupada did emphasize this point, and he really emphasized it a lot. If you listen to his lectures, this point about, and conversations, this point about the necessity of sacrifice and how it will lead to a lack of it will lead to lack of food and so on, and natural disasters and so on. But you have to take things in like a broader perspective. The time frame, you have to take time in a broader perspective, not just focusing on 100 or 200 years or something like that. Now apparently it seems that some countries seem to be flourishing. Many don't, but some do appear to be flourishing. And it's sort of like the examples given in the past of Hiranyakashipu. When Hiranyakashipu, Lord Nrsimhadev, the Supreme Personality of God, had appeared as Lord Nrsimhadev to kill him, and he was fighting with him. Then at some point he sort of did something which made Hiranyakashipu, I think he dropped something, or I don't know, he did something that Hiranyakashipu, or was it Hiranyakashipu or was it Hiranyaksha? I think it might have been Hiranyaksha. Anyway, one of those two demons, they had this moment where it seemed like they were gaining some ground, like they were going to win. But it was just the Supreme Lord, like, giving them a small bit of mercy, playing with them, sort of. And the example's given of a mouse. Cat plays with the mouse, and sometimes it gives it some freeway, but then kills it. So, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purports there that this is the arrogance of materialists. That when they just have a little bit of success for a few years or something, and they say, we can defy God and completely ignore God and still be materially successful, just see. But it's just a matter of time before these things catch up with one. Yeah, it's just a matter of time. Already we are starting to see, for example, so many natural disasters and epidemics and famines. When I was at university, I came across a very interesting point. I thought it was a very, very interesting point. Srila Prabhupada often emphasizes that all these wars that people have been experiencing, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, all these huge wars in which millions of people are killed, he many times was emphasizing that it is due to animal slaughter. That because you're slaughtering animals en masse, your children and so on will be slaughtered en masse in wars and so on. Like, for example, the Vietnam War. Years later it was said that it was discovered that while it was happening, the persons involved, they were like, we don't know really what's going on, but I guess we just send more men, just keep sending more men and hope for the best. And this way they were just sending thousands of American boys to just be shot, So, when I was studying at the university, studying history, I came across an interesting book called Age of Extremes by, I forget the historian's name now, but quite a well-known historian. So in this book he explains that this 20th century, from the 1900s on, is an age of extremes. He calls it an age of extremes. And he says that, according to his calculation, never before in recorded human history, you can take all the wars that have taken place in recorded human history, and add up all the casualties, and it will come nowhere near to the even just one war in this 19th century, how many people have died. And he explains that the turning point of it all was World War I. World War I was the first time people saw such a huge amount of people being killed en masse. World War I took place in 1914, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 1914, and went for about 5 years or so. Okay, so just at the start of the turn of the century. And he explains that after World War I, people thought this must never happen again. It was we don't know how such a thing happened. It was a complete disaster. Never seen anything like it before, but all we know is it must never happen again. And the Allied powers met to sign the Treaty of Versailles. There's this treaty that was signed with Germany and so on. And the whole purpose of the treaty was that we'll make a treaty, arrange things in such a way that this must never happen again. And what happened just maybe a decade or so or more later, World War II happened. And this author, Eric Hobsbawm, that's the author's name, Eric Hobsbawm explains that when World War II happened, it made World War I look insignificant in terms of how many people were killed and so on. So what is going on? And he explains that actually in hindsight, historians in hindsight looking back, and even politicians looking back at the Treaty of Versailles, despite what they had in mind, they purposed that trying to arrange things now that this will never happen again. He says in hindsight, the Treaty of Versailles, by doing that, they were basically setting up World War II. So do you see there's something else going on here? They're not in control, in other words, of what's happening. So they basically set up World War II through the Treaty of Versailles, although the whole purpose of that treaty was to avoid such a thing ever happening again. So World War II happened, that made World War I seem insignificant. So many more people died. Then there was Vietnam, and then after that it was just like one after the other they started coming. Vietnam, millions, 60,000 Americans died, but if you look at the actual Vietnamese people in surrounding areas, historians have calculated it was millions upon millions died either directly or later on as a result of that war. There's 1994, there was Rwanda. I actually know someone who's from Rwanda who was there at the time, managed to escape, but 900,000 people were massacred in a genocide, like a racial type of genocide. And it's just so, these days we don't even we don't even think about it anymore. We become so jaded to these things. But it's happening all the time. So, okay, so that's there. Eric Hobsbawm, he doesn't know, he can't, he's just pointing out the facts. He doesn't know why these things are happening. Srila Prabhupada says it's due to animal slaughter. And so I thought that was quite interesting because the Industrial Revolution made animal slaughter possible on a large, like a mass scale. And as far as I understand, the Industrial Revolution took place at the end of the 1800s. Is that correct? Yeah? So at the end of the 1800s, Industrial Revolution takes place, machines become very prominent, and animal slaughter becomes possible on a mass scale. And then 1914, mass wars and all these things, which Hobsbawm says were like a huge turning point in known human history. This all of a sudden mass human slaughter starts taking place. So it does appear, at least from what I can see, that there's empirical evidence in that regard, at least what Srila Prabhupada said in terms of the reactions to animal slaughter. And in time we will see also the effect of not performing sacrifice. However, another important point to remember is that since Srila Prabhupada has come, the Sankirtan movement has spread all around the world. So sacrifice is going on. The Sankirtan Yagya sacrifice has been performed in pretty much every major city, definitely pretty much every country in the world, more or less. It's been performed on a regular basis, chanting of the holy name congregationally, and giving Krishna consciousness this process of chanting to others. So we can't ignore that effect as well. That effect is also there. That yagya is being performed, as is recommended in the Shastra. The Sankirtan Yagya is being performed now. Gradually, more and more, it's happening. So, Srila Prabhupada actually, as far as I'm aware, he stated that there was meant to be a World War III. You know, with the Cold War, America and Russia, that was getting pretty intense, and they both had nuclear weapons, and it was like, there were some pretty close calls. But somehow that all just seemed to sort of fizzle out at some point in history, in the 80s, more or less. And Srila Prabhupada, as far as I understand, said that, or was it early before the 80s, I'm not sure, but Srila Prabhupada said that the Sankirtan movement, as far as I understand, saved the world from that, World War II. But the point is, World War III rather, but the point is that the effect is there. Sankirtan Yagya is spreading all around the world. Lord Chaitanya's, the age, the golden age, which is mentioned in the Shastra, the first 10,000 years of Kali Yuga, where the Sankirtan movement spreads all around the world, and there's like a type of a golden age before Kali Yuga really sets in. All that is basically, we're in that now. It's slowly starting, we're not so far in, but it's happening. And we will start to see the effects of it. Still there's lots of sinful activities and so on going on, but we'll gradually start to see the effects of the Sankirtan movement. But it is also up to us. It is up to us to make that happen or not, to try to engage in the Sankirtan Yagya nicely and try to give the process of chanting the holy names to others as well. Is that okay? Sorry, long answer, but yeah, it is a big topic. Did you want to say something, or is it okay? Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions? We've actually got a bit over time. My apologies for that. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol.